From the Widowmaker answering the call of the Nomad to the fans labeling it a wild mismatch. This is the Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Kelvin Gastelum's fight announced. And it was actually the Nomad who called out the former middleweight contender, which I gotta admit, was a little surprising. Anyway, after considering the challenge from the young Kazakh for a few days, Gastelum decided to accept it. Rakhmonov tweeted out when Kelvin announced that he was dropping back to 170 pounds, so the Nomad thought it'd be a good idea to welcome him to the division. Kelvin not only accepted the challenge, but he even proposed a date and a venue for their fight.
I accept, Shavkat Rakhmonov, your challenge at 170 pounds. And not only that, I'll give you a date.
Gastelum said on his YouTube channel that he wanted to fight on Mexican Independence Day, which happens to be on September 16th, and he wants to do it in Las Vegas. Dana White was sold on the idea. And it made sense too, because previously the flyweight champ, Alexa Grasso, also proposed the same date for her rematch against Valentina Shevchenko. Gastelum, being of Mexican descent himself, makes for the perfect guy to have on the card, so Dana announced that he'll be in the co-main event against Shavkat, and Nina will be headlining the card alongside Grasso. But like I said before, it doesn't really make any sense for the Nomad to take a fight with someone like Kelvin. I mean, the guy's clearly struggling in his career right now, and he's ranked at number 12 on the middleweight ladder. Yes, he was once a huge prospect as a welterweight, but that was a long time ago, when he was forced to move up to 185 after failing on the scales multiple times. He did take Israel Adesanya through a battle, but then again, it was way back in 2019. And since then, Gastelum has lost 5 times in his 7 matches. Compare that to the record of Shavkat, who has won all 5 of his matches in the UFC, and he has been able to consistently finish off his opponents. Plus, being ranked number 6 on the welterweight ladder, the Nomad should be looking ahead to cement himself as a top contender in the division. This fight with Kelvin doesn't really help him out with his title aspirations. Maybe he just wanted to stay active, but he could have asked for a match against guys that are at least close to him. Shavkat has established himself as one of the hottest prospects in the UFC right now, especially after his last fight with Jeff Neal at UFC 285. People thought of Rakhmonov as a one-dimensional fighter who'd only rely on his wrestling skills to win. But against Neal, he showed that he can brawl in the octagon too. Jeff snubbed any takedown attempts, so instead of turning off, the Nomad chose to engage in a striking match with one of the best boxers on the roster. He showed the world that he can take punches and dish them out when he sees an opening. Even Neal was surprised at how good Shavkat's striking is, and how unfazed he was when he lost his mouthguard in the middle of the fight. Rakhmonov kept at it for almost the entire match, but he also had to protect his perfect record of finishes. So in the very last minute of the fight, Shavkat grabbed a hold of Jeff and submitted him with a standing rear naked choke. This was not only impressive because of how rarely someone can pull it off, but also because he had enough strength and presence of mind to do that after exchanging punches for 14 minutes. Rakhmonov may be on the hunt for the title, but Kelvin accepted the fight because he's chasing the UFC gold too. Gastelum explained this to the fans on his YouTube channel and said that's why this fight's so important to him. Beating a young and exciting fighter like Shavkat would put him in the talks for the strap and would also help him in securing better fights in the future. Kelvin at 31 feels like he's been fighting forever. He may not be that old, but the octagon takes its toll on a fighter, so he feels that he's not that young anymore either. Gastelum added that he wants to make the most of the time he has left in the cage, and the only way to do it is by taking up the toughest fights out there. He doesn't want to hang up his gloves and later regrets his decisions wondering about what could have been. The closest that Kelvin ever got to UFC gold was when he fought Izzy for the interim middleweight belt. He may have lost the match, but that fight's still remembered by the fans for being one of the most exciting ones in the history of the UFC. If Gastelum somehow manages to win against the Nomad, then it might just be the game changer he's looking for, and he actually believes that he'll be able to defeat the young Kazakh. Kelvin said that stylistically this is a bad fight for Rakhmonov to take because he's sloppy when he's moving forward, and that would allow Gastelum to land his punches almost at will. He can also nullify the threat of Shavkat on the ground, and Kelvin predicts that he's going to be the one who'll be taking the Nomad down. and maybe even finish him off with a submission of his own. Dana said that this one's a very exciting fight to watch because Rakhmonov's putting his perfect record on the line against a very tough guy in the UFC. But you can't overlook the fact that Gastelum hasn't fought as a 170-pounder since 2016, and the weight cut might not work out in his favor. You guys must have seen countless times how fighters lose a fight because of a bad weight cut. And this was the issue that forced Kelvin to move up in the first place. The Nomad is a very intelligent fighter, and if he sees even a chink in Gastelum's armor, you can be sure that he's going to exploit it to the fullest. Then there's also the fact that Kelvin just returned to the octagon after a long hiatus. Ring rust is a very real thing in the UFC, and Dana talks a lot about how it affects the fighters. Gastelum took an almost 2-year break after he lost to Jared Cannonier in August 2021 and came back to face Chris Curtis at UFC 287. He may have won against the Action Man, but the fight was too close for comfort, and the decision was controversial because the judges failed to see the accidental head clash in round 2. If a bottom-of-the-pack guy like Chris can take Kelvin through 3 whole rounds after potentially getting a concussion in the match, then you can imagine what Rakhmonov's gonna do to him. The man knows no mercy once the doors to the octagon are closed, and those things that he mentioned about him not being a good matchup for Shavkat stylistically might just end up working against him on the night. Kelvin hasn't been at the top of his game for a while now. Some of you might remember his glory days when he took out the legendary Michael Bisping in the first round, or when he defeated the dangerous Uriah Hall to secure a spot on the UFC roster. But those days are long gone now. Gastelum got picked apart by almost every single title contender at middleweight and thought that he could reinvent himself by taking a long break to work on his techniques. But that doesn't seem to be working out for him either. Yes, the fight against Curtis was worthy of the $50,000 bonus, but remember, this was against the guy who serves as the gatekeeper for young prospects at middleweight, and the 170-pound division is a whole different beast because it's completely stacked. Even the fans are predicting that it's going to be a slaughter. Shavkat has gained tons of momentum after he defeated Neil at UFC 285. And people are finally starting to realize how good the young Kazakh is. While some fans were lauding Kelvin for his bravery to take a tough fight, others were just telling him that he has already lost, because Rakhmonov's going to become the champion soon enough. A guy even pointed out that the Nomad is within touching distance of the UFC gold, and it's a mistake to take a fight against an unranked opponent at welterweight. Dana may be calling it a great fight in the making, but the truth is that it doesn't make sense to most of the fans, because it's only going to delay Rakhmonov's title shot. Some of the fans even doubt that Gastelum's going to make the weight for the fight, because he has missed doing so countless times in the past. It'll be interesting to see how well Kelvin will do against a young fighter as skilled as Shavkat. The young Kazakh isn't risking a whole lot by taking this fight, and the only thing he'll have on the line is going to be his 100% finish rate, because let's face it, the Nomad's not losing this one. So from the fans calling it a wild mismatch, to the Widowmaker answering the call of the Nomad, this was all about the announcement of Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Kelvin Gastelum's fight.